Some of the oldest and most picturesque architecture of the American continent is found in the colonial cities of Guatemala, largest of the Central American republics. Erected by Spanish colonists and meant to last forever, both as homes and as fortresses against possible savage uprisings, there has been no need to replace with new era building the original edifices of such communities as Quetzaltenango, whose residents enjoy aloof seclusion in beautiful old homes withdrawn behind plain, unpromising walls. From the street in Quetzaltenango, we see no gardens, but nevertheless behind these walls are colorful, flower-filled patios, and gardeners enjoy a thriving business in this old city. These doorways, copper-studded and hand-carved, came to America with the conquistadores and have done service for hundreds of years. They are to be found in all the older, larger palacios. Ancient, infinitely picturesque streets winding between Guatemalan homes are often the setting for medieval as well as modern scenes. The old religious customs that added a note of mysticism to the town and city life of New Spain are still in practice, and here we see one in Quetzaltenango. Some Latin American countries prohibit this type of religious procession in the open streets, but Guatemala does not interfere with religion in any manner whatsoever. These simple people, wending their way to the cathedral to burn candles, pray, and thus fulfill a sacred vow, may tie up traffic in the narrow thoroughfares for as long as they please, and no one will mention the matter. They are of the poor or laboring class, but it will be observed that they have made a great effort at dressing themselves circumspectly, some even affecting unaccustomed ties in their solemn desire to display proper respect for their little ceremony. Although there is a wide variation in the homes of Quetzaltenango, the differences lie mostly in the interiors, for from the streets they assume a modest similarity. This is a middle-class residential section of town. And here is a neighborhood that has definitely become a vivienda, or tenement district. You will notice that the streets are at all times orderly and very nearly empty. Urban Guatemaltecos live their lives indoors, or at least behind walls. 10 guardian volcanoes were formerly charged with the protection of the ancient Indian city of Xelajú before the Spanish conquered that thriving community and renamed it Quetzaltenango. Here we see one of these impressive peaks, which has looked down upon city life in this exact spot since before history. These urchins observe our filmmaking in dignified curiosity. They do not know they are the subjects of our effort, as the Guatemaltecos will rarely pose willingly for picture taking. A quaint civic improvement in Quetzaltenango is the Footbridge. This well-constructed stone arch has convenienced and protected the pedestrians of many generations from the periodic flooding of streets, which often leaves them impassable for hours at a time. A number of these bridges serve the city in this manner, while being so ornamental that they are forever remembered as one of Quetzaltenango's characteristic attractions. Far and away the most fascinating city of Guatemala is Antigua, ancient and now abandoned capital, entered through this arch which discloses our first glimpse of the volcano Agua. It seems that Antigua also has her street flood problem, which she solves with such primitive little wooden affairs as this, which is portable and effective enough for the Antigueños. Built for a population 10 times its present size, the modern residents have their choice of hundreds of more or less ruined, more or less restored dwelling places that before the great earthquake of 1773 housed the wealthiest and most aristocratic families of New Spain. Marvelous ruins such as the Capuchin Nunnery, once occupied by 1,000 women of the Capuchin order, are the delight of artists and students. And here we have the perfectly restored Popenoe House, celebrated by outstanding modern writers, photographers, and painters, stationed at its famous corner in the Calle de la Nobleza. Each old stone and grill of this gracious structure is alive with a 400-year-old history that has encompassed every phase of the dramatic contrast that has comprised the unique and touching life of Antigua. Its fascinating restoration by the Wilson Popenoes attract hundreds of visitors yearly to the house. which is always under the watchful eye of old Maria, the Indian housekeeper. Maria's life in the casa predates its purchase and renewal by the Poconos. In homes such as this, a gracious race lived, and to a certain extent still lives in Antigua, amid flower-bedecked patios, tasteful colonial appointments, behind wooden-grilled and shuttered windows of great beauty. Today, the Pocono house is as integral a part of Antigua as are the town's most pretentious religious relics. Modern tendencies appear, however, and in her civic life and enlightened educational system, Antigua compares favorably with contemporary world standards. Just around the corner from the Casa Pocono is the normal school for senoritas, where 300 small girls are being prepared for life in a modern world. There is certainly nothing remarkable in the sight of schoolgirls homeward bound in any clime. However, the spirit that infuses Antigua even today is very different from our conception of modernity, and it is precisely because she has maintained her individuality through the ages that Antigua is proving a never-ending source of delight to present-day visitors. This quiet street and lone Indian figure is one of her unfailingly picturesque scenes. One must look twice to identify this unimposing cottage door as the corner grocery store. Here we have an example of the small, unassuming, but inevitable patio occupied and enjoyed by people of the laboring classes. Close by, a famous mansion of a mayor of Antigua in the days of her elegance escaped serious damage in the big earthquake. Having been perfectly restored, the Alcázar has been opened to the tourist as a luxurious home for his use as headquarters while exploring the enchanted city of its location. It is known that the original fabulously wealthy owners were wont to replace the water in this fountain with wines of Spain on festive occasions. Lovely doorways, windows, fixtures are exactly as they were first designed and installed. But what of the ancient glory of Antigua that has not been restored? This is what remains of San Francisco, once the home of a great religious community and an internationally respected university. San Francisco was one of the most delicately executed and artistically decorated architectural efforts of all colonial Central America. And here is the shell of the old cathedral, though portions of it have been restored and are still in use by Antigueños. Half buried in highland jungle and coffee fincas, one discovers the remarkably beautiful ruins of what must have been one of the most exquisite convents of all time, La Recolección. Several of the perfect arches featured throughout the magnificent structure survive, epitomizing the breathtaking achievement that it was. Although much of the meaning underlying the construction of these great religious centers, as well as their ancient glory, is now beyond recall, they are probably actually more famous today than ever before. Through the appreciation of the artists, historians, and archaeologists who devotedly haunt the ruins, Antigua has finally had restored to her a measure of her original significance.